All right. Apparently, we are live. Hello, everybody. This is the weekly Q&A and form checks with some starting strength coaches. We have two of the three of us right now. Alex Mitchell will be popping in a little bit later. And we're going to be doing something a little bit different than we usually do. So outside of the standard form checks, we're going to be doing programming talk for the most part. Big topic for today is going to be starting strength, NLP versus Stronglifts. Why they're kind of samey, but also very different. One of them is clearly inferior to the other. But I got my boy with me here. We have Chase Lindley coming in from Oklahoma.
What's up, guys?
Chase, any recent updates for the gang?
Looking forward to doing the weightlifting meet in Wichita Falls. That's going to be in July, I think July 24th. And that's going to be the clean and press, the snatch, and the clean and jerk. So I've been definitely kicking the Olympic lifts into high gear now.
How many weeks do you have left?
Still like a little over 2 months. I'm thinking like 2 months and maybe a week or so.
And this will be your first time with a taper according to the Olympic lifts.
Yep, first time.
Right. Okay. Are you going to function your volume landmarks similar to the press for the taper? Or how are you going to do it?
Yeah, kind of. What I'm thinking right now is, since I'm still kind of new to the lifts, that kind of just run it all the way up until about 4 weeks, and then I'll start a 4-week taper.
Oh, nice. Greg Locke said, "Hi, guys. Apparently it's working." That's the science that we can confirm. All right, cool. But yeah, so if I have some questions for your taper itself, a lot of people during their tapers will like to train into the meet quite hard. So like if they're, if let's say if they need a high frequency bench, they'll still bench 3 times that week leading into it. What has been your approach so far? Has it been different lift to lift?
So with the standard like strength lifting, I'll go with like a squat, a press, and a deadlift. Yeah, I would train the press 4 days a week. The squat, just essentially I'm doing maybe once and cutting off the volume. I'm just basically with any peak, you're focusing on the intensity, right? Because our objective is to, squat 1 heavy rep, press 1 heavy rep, and deadlift 1 heavy rep. Pulling frequency, yeah, that's also been cut. I think mainly the upper body stuff, you can keep the same frequency and basically the same volume. But what was I doing? I think I was still doing like a 5x5 or even like a 5x3, kind of doing a little bit more intensity with my volume. But
really? Okay. Yeah. So 15 or across like pretty high intensity reps for 15. Nice. Okay. But did we just lose Chase?
No.
Oh, no, he's there. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so peaking strategies, very different. I think one of the interesting things, if anybody is watching and trying to figure out a peak, if you ever have a really good day in the gym and you didn't think you did anything anomalous, you have likely accidentally peaked yourself if you're doing a little bit of willy-nilly programming. So if you go in and like everything feels 50 pounds lighter than it normally is, you need to go back and check, did you take an extra rest day here? Or did you modify some intensity, let's say a week and a half ago, 2 weeks? Did you chop off some reps? This is one of the reasons why you need to track all of your training. And if you are programming for anyone, you'll notice this as well. And then you can start to kind of deduce backwards from that. And you'll notice the trends. RTS is really good about this, about basically timing exposures to see, how many you really need before kind of that peak lift comes in. And for a lot of people for benching, you can still hammer that thing with frequency. But like what Chase is saying, like the squat and the deadlift, like it's a little bit too taxing to kind of keep that skill practice going in.
Yep.
For sure. But yeah, okay, all right, cool. I guess we will dig into it. Starting strength, novice linear progression versus strong lifts. I know Rip actually just talked about this a little bit, about like the bastardization of the LP, and then now it's become strong lifts. When did you first hear about strong lifts, Chase?
This was years ago, and I thought someone was referring to like the Texas method, where they said basically I'm doing a 5x5 on everything. I was like,
everything all the time.
Yeah. I was like, that doesn't really sound like the Texas method, but sure. I think this was maybe 4 or 3 years ago, and I think one of my clients brought it up, or like a drop in from the gym. And he just brought it up. He's saying, I'm doing a 5x5. I'm like, well, you should be probably doing the novice linear progression, but
just all the time. Yeah,
exactly.
Have you run into this experience before where people will, during their contact with you, be like, oh, well, I started with strong lifts and it wasn't really panning out. And then I kind of looked where strong lifts came from. Then they would find starting strength, and then they'll do a successful LP once they're in contact with good coaches.
Yep. I would say like out of the total number of people I've coached, at least 10% of them have came from strong lifts.
Yeah. Yeah. And if like I'm ever talking to someone in person and then I'm like, oh, I work for a company starting strength, yada, yada, things like that. I'm gonna be like, oh, is that like strong lifts? And I'll be like,
yes,
no.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of things that we need to go over basically about what the differences are. But first, I guess we'll go to what Stronglifts is and then compare that to starting strength. So as everybody should likely know, if you're watching this, starting strength, your A and B workouts, you're syncopating them. It's going to have a squat and a deadlift every single time. And then you're going to be alternating an upper body movement with bench press and overhead press. And a lot of like the colloquial just okay things that everyone does are, if you can do chin-ups from the get-go, do chin-ups from the get-go. If you have a vested interest in Olympic lifting, start your power cleans earlier than you would otherwise. And then what do you think else is in there that's just kind of common parlance?
I think you basically hit all of it. I think maybe doing some conditioning with like a prowler or some sort, they'll probably throw that in. But the majority is what you said.
If you're young, you have a little bit more resources to spare, and that's okay. But Stronglifts, on the other hand, they take a different approach. So everything, so if it was 3x5 before, it's 5x5 now. Oh, we got Crown of Iron in here. He says, hi, another lockdown in West Australia, gym closed again. Really sucks. I'm sorry, Crown of Iron. I think he's that Australian football guy who's been making pretty decent gains. I don't know how strict that lockdown is. Get a home gym, man. Get on it. Yeah. That's unfortunate. But bodyweight training can take you far. I saw how much muscle mass you had on you. You can put some more meat on you with that. Just hammer it home. But yeah, so Stronglifts, 5x5s across the board, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, flat intensity for workouts ABA, same thing with BAB. And then they alternate overhead press and bench press, just like we do, surprise. But they do 5x5s there. And rather than putting in deadlifts 1x5 across the board or 5x5 even, they've introduced the barbell row rather than, let's say, the chin up or let's say a lat pull down or a cable row or anything like that. Barbell rows 5x5, and you're gonna be doing that 2 times first week, 1 time the second week. So that's basically it. It's just kind of a dead simple copy of starting strength, but they have rather than keeping the deadlift intensity high, they've decided to put in the barbell row and then increase the volume landmarks across the board. Starting strength, imagine all of this being 3x5, take out the barbell row because we kind of consider it to be useless, but we'll get on to that a little bit later on, so for someone who's a ranked novice. So we'll go back to the last slide here. So the arguments that I want to go through are going to be volume. So why do we choose a volume target? It's anything, why not start at 1 set of 5 and then work your way up to 3? Why not start at 10 sets of 5? We'll do exercise selection and criteria. I think this is a really important part of starting strength foundation. We'll talk about recovery. What's that like for an actual novice athlete? And then why so many goddamn people do Stronglifts, because they think that, at that stage of the game, more is more better. Chase, which one of these stand out to you is the most important?
I would say the criteria, right? Because that is the basis of what you're judging everything off of, right? And with starting strength, we judge the lifts off of 3 criteria, right? The greatest effective range of motion. Well, yeah, true. But, it all leads to major 1, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So you got the 3 criteria, 1 being the greatest effective range of motion, right?
A very important word, effective. Number 2.
Effective. So most weight used. So how much weight you can use on the bar. And then the most muscle mass, right? And all those 3 kind of make that huge pillar of strength that we're so, focused about. Yeah.
So the 4th criteria, and thus get stronger. Because if you kind of go through those first 3, you're like, what? A Turkish get up with a heavy kettlebell seems like it blasts a ton of this criteria. But that 4th one is functionally saying it can be programmed and reliably. Right. So it's like a push-up, for example, can give you a lot of those things. It does a ton of muscle mass. You got quads in there, a bunch of trunk muscles, basically everything calves. But when it comes down to it, can you reliably get stronger on it in such an incremental way? Can it be programmed reliably? Not really. It can be programmed, but not as reliably as, let's say, the bench press can, And then that is kind of rationalist phenomenology that we'll see, but it is backed up by the experience of basically everyone universally everywhere, So it's like, why are our powerlifting competitions the bench press rather than, let's say the push-up or even the dip? Because it just changes. It's kind of too finicky. But let's talk about that first one, greatest range of motion. Effective range of motion.
The classic example is like the ass to grass squat, right? So you see 2 lifters. You got a guy who is squatting to where you can see his hip crease just below the top of his knee, which is depth. And then you see, lifter B over there with, 225 on, ass to grass, His hamstrings are slapping the back of his calves, right?
Yeah.
The problem with that is that he has to relax his hamstrings at the distal end? No, yep, I think it's the distal end.
Yeah, behind the knee.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So he is now reduced some of the muscle mass, one of the criteria, and he can't use as much weight, right? Because it takes a little bit of you lessening the intensity on the bar to actually get in that position. Now, it's pretty easy to get in that position with heavy weights, but coming back up from that position, that's the hard thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of nuance that goes into this specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for anybody watching this is basically just kind of like a loose programming episode. If you have any questions, if anything we say sounds like bullshit, call out immediately, because it's nice to know, that we're wrong sometimes, and if we're not, that we're right all the time, and that's really cool. But yeah, so like when we're saying like the hamstrings relaxing or effective range of motion, we kind of need to think about like the win condition for why we're doing the thing. So it's like starting strength, strong lifts. We're trying to make these lifts larger by some proxy. And then whenever we use lifts with the maximum range of motion, you can kind of extend that to be like, I'm going to take the narrowest grip possible in the press so I can go through the most closed elbow angle that I can, and wrist angle, right? Shoulders are a pretty similar angle. Same thing with the deadlift. Like, why wouldn't we just do a deficit deadlift all the time? With the overhead press, why don't we bounce it all the way right at the bottom of our sternum as opposed to bouncing it right at our throat? Like, there's a ton of those things where we can say it's just not as reliable or as discretely definable, because your ankle flexibility, knee and hip, is different every day. So on the third day of the week, on your workout 3 for that time, your flexibility is not going to be as much as it is after coming in after your 2-day break, because you're carrying all that systemic fatigue, whatever you want to define that as. So like when we're saying, why don't you just go as deep as you can? What if as deep as you can is different on workout 3 as opposed to workout 1? So it kind of creates all these little problems of saying, I want to be able to do the same thing super identifiably all the time. So what is my effective range of motion? It's something that we all kind of agree upon as a happy medium that is standardized. Andrew Travis saying hi. Howdy, Andrew Travis. Andrew. Got the double first name going on. We're talking programming today. Ask some questions if you have them. If you don't, that's also cool. But yeah, so effective range of motion. Second one, most weight on the bar. Why does that matter? That's stupid, right?
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of like a no-brainer, right? So strength is the ability to produce force. And if you're not putting as much force to moving that heavy weight, what are you doing, right? So it's kind of it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You see people. I'll take like the example of like Vikings back in the day picking up rocks. The rocks that are getting bigger and the guys that are picking up the bigger rocks, of course, are always the strongest. And you can't get strong picking up the little pebble that, Blarg over there is trying to pick up.
Yeah. It's what was that Rogue documentary? Fellskirter, I think, was the Iceland one.
Yeah, dude, like they've had a crazy shit. Like I've heard one where like a farmer had carried like I think it was like a 200 kg stone from like the shore to like half a mile inland. A bunch of crazy stuff.
Yeah, I just did a 495 yoke today for 20 meters. That was some bullshit. I can't imagine not doing that in rigid yoke form. But yeah, so like the relevance of weight on the bar, like if you're doing this just for aesthetic purposes, and then you can say, oh, well, I'm so big brained that I'm completely divorcing the function of my muscles from physical reality, or I can say that hypertrophy or muscle growth is a totally different concept than strength. I don't think anyone can super confidently do that. We can say that strength isn't super tied to hypertrophy because people can continue to get stronger and stronger and not get bigger. Oh, we got our boy Alex Mitchell in here.
Oh,
Alex Mitchell.
Hello.
Oh my God, look at this guy. He has a couch and everything. We're talking programming today, man. We're working through the exercise selection criteria.
Oh, let's do it.
I know we're talking Stronglifts versus SSNLP. Alex Mitchell is a starting strength coach from northern Georgia, just north of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. Some people might say in Atlanta. Yep.
In Atlanta itself. But yeah, he's here now through your computer. And then Lee Pavlich asked an interesting thing, or said something. Another hidden criterion seems to be something like what constitutes a completed rep is reasonably and objectively defined. So power cleans greater than high pulls. Yeah, we were just dealing with this with what's his name? Stephen Lewis last week from he's that guy who's pressing 285, he's benching, high 4, something like that. He wants to know if you should be doing speed deadlifts or if you should be doing power cleans. And it's just like, yeah, the power clean is a speed deadlift, and we're just saying what it is because you're putting it on your shoulders. You know what I mean? Plus, you get all the other added benefits of the clean. You know, so it's a good point. Yeah, it's like having definitions is really helpful. You know, you can kind of get up your own butt with terminology. Yeah, Ben. Yeah, it is definitely linked to effective range of motion because we're saying effective kind of like in the phenomenological sense of how does this interplay with what you're actually doing in the gym, not effective for like how these muscles are working, you know.
Now, have we touched on the sort of question of effective range of motion being the effective range of motion for the muscle mass trained versus the effective range of motion like
for
total?
the lift itself?
Yeah, for the lift itself.
Yeah, we tapped on it. I think one of the things was like saying like with the press, for example, it's like you can do the hips press, the bouncy press all the way down basically to here if you have the shoulders for it. You know what I mean? I guess the deltoids are getting a little more stretched. You're getting a little bit of, you know, pec minor in there, maybe kind of depending on the angle. Elbow angle may get more closed. So it's just like effective range of motion for the muscles. I'm not really entirely sure. It kind of puts them in a shitty place to pull from, but I wouldn't be effective range of motion for the lift itself. So it's like it's a good point that people, when they see that effective, they're like, right, but like the hamstrings don't just completely relax; they're still doing something, and it's like, yeah, but how does that interplay with reality?
Yeah.
And also, your head out of the rabbit hole.
And also, you know, one of the things that I see so often in this has to do with the deadlift, and particularly with the demographics that I deal with. You know, a lot of guys start at least when they're starting out, and sometimes for longer than younger folk might take, have to deadlift from a little higher than the standard deadlift height, and you know that is made up. That the height of the deadlift is completely made up.
It's a manufacturing thing.
Exactly. It was a manufacturing thing. The plates were that big because it was easiest to make a 45-pound plate that big for some guy, right? Who was making 45-pound plates before anyone
I have
else
a friend who almost exclusively does wagon wheel deadlifts, and he's super jacked. So
of course, because you can do that. So
they look great.
I see a lot of people who like read the book and they do all this stuff and they get their panties in a wad about that, and it is not as significant as other things like consistency.
Yeah, unwad your panties on that one.
Yeah, for
sure. So next thing, I suppose, we hammered out exercise selection and criteria. Now, as we touch this back to the primary point, make sure to keep tabs on that for me, that I'm bringing it back to SSNLP versus Stronglifts. But why does this matter? You know, so it's like they have the barbell row in there. We don't have the barbell row in there. Exercise selection for the barbell row, how do we feel about it? As compared to the deadlift, because if we're presenting option A, option B.
God, the deadlift is just so much superior to the barbell row in range of motion, in load. I mean, it is just a better lift. And if you're using the barbell row for power, why aren't you just using the power clean, right?
Well, not only that, like what is the heaviest barbell row? Like what, 600 or so?
Right.
What is the heaviest deadlift? It's
1100, right? Yeah,
exactly. So what do you think that guy who's rowing 500 or rowing 4 bills is going to be deadlifting?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's
So
going to be
by definition, the barbell row is so submaximal compared to a true 1RM deadlift.
Yeah. And why are we doing it in the first place? Strength, and then we can go back to this exercise selection criteria. Almost everything references back to that. And then now let's hear, Chase, I want to hear your take on this one. As someone who deadlifts a lot and has quite the back, how do you feel when people say, well, the deadlift doesn't really work most of the back, it's just working the erectors?
That is insane.
Really say that?
Oh, yeah. All the fucking
time. Are you serious?
Yeah. So that's a common take. Because it's not, because you're not pulling the arm back.
Yeah. Like I use the example of your like to my clients who are kind of having trouble with just picturing like what the legs do associated with, like, you know, pressing the feet through the floor, making sure that your back is a rigid segment. I use the analogy of your body is a human crane, right? So everyone has seen a crane pick up stuff. Your back is the arm of the crane, right? It's transmitting the force that is being applied from your legs, pushing the floor, and your arms are the chain, the rope, whatever that's hanging onto the load. Now, we have to hang on to the load with the lats. So the lats are actually pulling back, right? Yeah. We can't just hang on to the thing, or else like our shoulder would not be over the bar. It would not be in the correct position to where we pull adequately on the bar.
The shoulder would be directly over the bar rather than at an angle to the bar, right?
And I think
The armpit sits over the bar in the deadlift, whether you like it to or not, if it's heavy enough.
exactly.
And that means it's hanging from the lat.
And that's one of the
attachment to
cool
lat.
things. If you ever watch Dan Green do like stiff legged deadlifts, the bar is his shoulder. Like he'll do kind of like deficit stiff legs. His actual shoulder will be like 5 or 6 inches past the bar. But the guy has the world's largest lats, so he's just doing this straight arm pull down with like 600 pounds, and you're like, you go, man, you go, girl. But yeah, like in simply put, like the bar is attached to your arms. Your arm musculature, guess what, is attached to your back. Right, it's attached to your shoulder and back, so it's like everything. Teres minor, teres major are receiving load, whether you realize it or not. They may not be going through a actual.
It's an isometric contraction. Right?
It's an isometric contraction. They're not being pulled through a range of motion.
They're not going.
You have to think about
or eccentric pull. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like we have to think about, and I would argue even eccentric in the nature of they're maintaining that isometric, but they're also all lengthening. I can guarantee you my traps are longer when I have 500 hanging on my hands than they are otherwise. So they're fighting that constantly. So it's like, are there contraction coupling cycles happening all over your back the entire time? Absolutely. Who is this sensitive for? Novices. That isometric is way more than enough. Way more than enough for them at that stage of the game. Plus, when we mix in, should they be doing chin-ups? Can they? And if they can't, should they be doing lat pull-down? Other things like that.
I can only assume that they mean you're not working your rhomboids. It's the only muscle that I can think of that I could even... I
don't know, man. Your scapular are being yanked apart pretty aggressively.
Exactly, but it's probably being loaded or eccentrically. So but I'm saying the argument for it's not working your back is just specious.
It's concentric. So they think that concentric only is what matters, I would say. That's it.
But we know that eccentric loading is actually, if you're doing the whole time under tension, hypertrophy.
Yeah, there's an argument for it. Yeah.
Then eccentric loading is much more or causes more myofibril damage. So
we're gonna have to do a really good job of making sure Alex Mitchell doesn't throw something at the screen for this.
Okay, he's getting heated.
We're putting up all of these. We're putting up all of the, and I'm trying to steel man these arguments as best as I can, just for the sake of it.
Well, you be the good cop, and I'll be the bad cop.
Yeah, just yell at people on the internet.
I'll just, so
I think that
it is starting strength.
A very reliable solution, and I'm interested because Alex Mitchell, maybe not so much in your population. I don't know if you have a lot of people doing chin-ups in general, but Chase, how many younger guys will you see who will not be able to do a chin-up or a pull-up, get their deadlift to grow, and then will be able to do one just completely out of the blue? Has that happened?
All of them. It's all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's that's one of my go-to with female clients as well, where it's just you may not be able to do a chin-up right now, but trust me, we're going to put a lot of weight on your deadlift, and then surprise, you'll be able to once you revisit later on, once everything on your back is stronger.
I see it with ladies more than anything for sure. But once the back gets stronger, the chin-up isn't as hard.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you can kind of mix that in. And I think that's a stimulus to fatigue ratio, or bang for buck, juice per squeeze, whatever you want to call it, and a chin-up. Amazing, because you're not carrying that erector fatigue that you would be carrying, let's say, with a barbell row, right? So it's Stronglifts in itself, they're not saying anything about exercise criteria, about really how to do the lifts. They just kind of point to other resources. I think they used to point to starting strength, but they kind of stopped. But just being you just kind of squat, sit down, stand up, barbell row, do the bodybuilding row, do the pendulum row, whatever the hell you want, despite them having incredibly different fatigue costs, right? So when you're analyzing it, you're thinking, which one of these should I actually do? If I'm a smart person trying to find an exercise program online, adding in the 5x5 for the barbell row, it's just I don't know if that's a really good idea. Because if you're doing a light version of the row that you can actually just kind of hold, like a flexion row or a bodybuilding row, is 25 reps of that even relevant? You know what I mean? Is a 5x5 there super relevant?
Right.
Not really.
For force production, probably.
Exactly. Yeah. Because remember, strength.
Yeah. Right.
Strong strength, starting strength.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So exercise selection criteria, I feel like we beat that to death.
I mean, there are many applications for the barbell row. Novice LP is not one of them.
Yeah, for sharks. Volume, how much landmarks? Chase, we'll you start here. How do you feel about all these volumes?
So the 5x5 is definitely going to kill a normal D-trained run-of-the-mill gen pop. They are going to put you
right. You're going to be sore as all hell.
Yeah, eventually you may even get rhabdo, right? And that's worst of the worst case.
Yeah, especially if you're already dehydrated and shit like that.
Exactly. And the majority of the public is dehydrated.
Dehydrated.
Right? Yeah, it's just a bad combination. You're going to get people hurt with that much volume.
Yep.
Now the volume. Think of it again. I love this analogy that they give through the programming lectures. That you're starting off with no tan, right? At the start, you're going out in the sun for 15 minutes, and then 3 months down the line, you're staying out 3 hours in the sun. But at that first initial stress, you can't overload it, or else you're going to cause some damage.
If you go out into the sun having had no tan for 3 hours, guess what?
Yep.
You get
Quick
burned.
pause real quick. We had a bunch more people pop in. Hi, everybody. We're basically doing a programming, free programming lecture on starting strength versus Stronglifts, NLP versus Stronglifts. If you have some programming questions, toss them in. Crowd of Iron said, also have started training football until lockdown stopped it. Amateur team is a mix of ages, and I'm keeping up with the guys 20 years younger than me, thanks to heavy barbell lifts.
Nice.
Hell yeah,
Unsurprisingly. Keep
Hell
up the good work,
dude.
man. Yeah, now that you don't have gyms anymore, get your weighted chin up, pull up, and dip to like 80 pounds. Just
Exactly.
go for it. Yeah.
Yep. Get it.
Just 6 times a week.
Yeah, I actually have a question for you guys because I don't really know what you guys what like the general starting strength community is doing as opposed to what I'm doing. When you start at a client, what is the very first like you've taught them the lifts? What's the very first workout they do, sets and reps?
Almost everyone has been working out before, so it's a modulation of what they'll go off of. But
Sure,
for
of
me,
course.
it's almost 100% pulling back absolute load a little bit, so everything we can do sticks, increasing that volume for a period of time so they have more practice with it, and then letting that run its natural taper back to kind of LPS volumes, and
Sure.
procedurally generating up from there.
Is it 3x5? Start out?
For people who are like technically sound, I think that's a totally fine amount. And
Okay.
you know, that's another thing. I very rarely deal with anyone who is detrained.
Yep. So
Right.
Chase, you're dealing with a lot more people who are detrained. Do you start them on 3x5?
The majority of the time they can handle that, but there is like, 1 or 3 people that are just like, no, you got to go with 3x3, and then maybe a 4x3 next week, and then eventually you transition back into a 3x5.
Exactly. And what I've been doing, because I'm dealing with old, like 20 years detrained Gen Pop who have never done starting strength before and they're scared of the squat, I get them on a 1x5 the first day. And their workout is 30 minutes and they're like, oh my God, I have found salvation. Are you actually Jesus Christ? Boom. And then they get home and they're not sore the next day. Yeah. And it's like the biggest change in their life that they've ever seen is that they can work out and not be crazy sore and broken. And then they do 2x5 and then they do 3x5.
Yeah, and that's been soreness is mimeticized into thinking efficiency, where it's just like, are you training the shit out of your biceps and your biceps is sore? That's a really good indicator that you're using your biceps. Is it hyper effective all the time to do that? Not even a little bit. You know what I mean? And especially for general population people. And so it's like this beginning process of finding your volume landmarks is a negotiation. If you have a coach, they're negotiating with you to see what your kind of upper tolerance is. And then just kind of starting with a 5x5 and then a 5x5. And let's say you start with barbell rows and another 5x5. It's just like good fucking luck.
Yeah, if you're going to be broken the next day.
Exactly. Yep. If you're, and that's a huge thing. It's like the goal here is for people to exercise indefinitely. It's not, just to be super cool on week one. We got a question for Franca Basile. On an HLM program, my heavy squat is 330 for 3 sets of 5. Why not add 5 pounds for light and medium day, but reduce the number of reps/sets to allow for recovery? That is a good question, but I think one that is very dependent on where you think the squat is fatiguing at. So for most people, the limiting point is axial fatigue as indicated by the back. Their back is the thing that gets tired. They can leg press way more than they can squat.
Exactly.
Experiencing that amount of load or increased loading on your volume day or your medium day or whatever the hell you want to call it, that's not going to prepare you. You know what I mean? So it's like if Chase, let's say, is trying to hit, a top set of 550 for 5 on his Friday, he doesn't want to carry 550 on the 2 previous workout days.
Yeah, this is a big neuromuscular efficiency conversation, I think, because if you're one of the, if you are squatting something like we were talking about last week, where like your absolute 1 rep max is 285, but you can rep 225 for like 15 reps in a row. Like, yeah, you can do that. You can work a lot more at your, 90% 1RM or whatever, and you won't be as fatigued by it perhaps. But, for someone like Chase, who has really, really high efficiency, it's it's not going to be indicated because you're going to run him into the ground.
Exactly. And like mental fatigue,
you're going to kill the man. Oh yeah. If you've not felt like a 90% 1RM set of 5 kind of thing, or a 92 or 93% for set of 5, like you can't do that again 2 days
by
from
definition.
then. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you can't do that again in 2 days. You can't that weight. Like you can't. Sometimes you can't even pick it up for one.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's like for me, like I'm. Oh, here we go. Steven, he says, is there a point as an intermediate that becomes less efficient to grind through / fail reps? Absolutely.
100%. Yes. Yeah. Great question.
Chase, you haven't talked in a bit. You take that one for us.
I don't know, man. Is there a point in intermediate that it becomes less efficient to grind through a fail? Yeah, I'm in the same boat as y'all, man. Like I personally, I love to grind right now. I love whenever people are grinding, because not only is it a show that they're getting stronger, but it's the mental aspect, right? So the novice linear progression is kind of like a honeymoon, right? You're able to add 5 pounds to everything, and then at the end, it's starting to get to where like, oh fuck, you're kind of getting tired of doing the same thing over and over, and the weights are getting really heavy, right? This is now training you and your behavior to become stronger, right? And you kind of have to develop that mindset, and you have to grind.
Question, True Chase. Let's say talk Texas method 5x5. How many of those reps are actually grindy? The first 15? Probably not.
No, not at all. Like
exactly.
And especially like you can rest. If you're doing a 5x5, you have enough time in the gym because you have nothing else to do that day except doing your squats. You can rest a long enough period between sets to be totally adequate to do that last set. Even if that fourth set on that 4th and 5th rep, they are grindy, you wait 8 minutes, and it's essentially the same rate of
almost the same set. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So Steven, I would say to cap this one off, because I want to make sure we get through all this. We're already 30 minutes in.
Can I reiterate one thing that Chase said?
Go for it.
If you're doing a 5x5, our primary qualification for choosing a 5x5 is that you have enough time to do it. Yeah. You should not, if you only have an hour to get a workout in, you are not a candidate for a 5x5. There are other ways you can get a lot more work done in a lot less time.
And that you can successfully do it. Like the 5x5 should not be something where it's just like, I wonder if I'll actually get this. You know what I mean? It's like that'll happen eventually once you're kind of getting up there. But it shouldn't be your intensity 1x5 that you're trying to do 5 times in a row.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Steven, I would say that the big thing to look at is, are you grinding in areas where you shouldn't be? That's probably an indicator that your expectations aren't matching reality. So the reality is how much you're actually adapting to your strength training. Your expectations are the numbers you're putting on the bar. That's kind of how you want to think about it. So if you're grinding through freaking everything, you'll notice that very early on in your career, and you're just kind of a slow, crappy person. You're that guy who can squat 285, but then 225 for 20, 2 minutes later. That'll be you. That's not you, Steven. You have like a 300-pound power clean. You're benching super heavy weights. You're throwing big laybacks up there. That's not you, Steve. But yeah, so back to volume. Why 5x5s versus 3x5s? I think this kind of goes back into taking the bait. The last point: who the audience for these things is, or are. Excuse me. If you are like a directionless 20-somethings male who's getting no attention from women or men, and you just think you're a spindly little piece of junk, and you're going on Reddit to find an exercise program, you'll probably think that more is more better, right? Because you just want results so fast. And at the same time, it's very alluring because you kind of feel like you're putting more in, you can make up for lost time. That's kind of the phenomenon I've noticed, where people will rush to it no matter what, because there's just more sets. But you think about it, like the average person should be exercising, and the place for them to start is not very aggressive. It's kind of that negotiation to say, like 3 sets, mental. So we'll go through this all and answer this once, but like in terms of mental efficiency, so say mental resources for the squat, when do you notice that starts to fall off? Like if you had someone do 10 sets of squats on their first day, could they mentally stay sharp enough? What's the upper and lower constraint for that?
Yeah. Like if I had that, like if I had a client who was, an elder lady, and I said, hey, do not even that, or like, let's do sets of 8 or something really high like that in the sense of volume, she's not going to come back. Like she's going to get too sore. Yeah. Because she's considerably detrained, and I'm running off clientele from that. They'll probably like it for the first 2 workouts, and then that increase amount of stress from the volume will just dump on them over time, and they'll just.
And it's so important to know that, like, to think about how many times at least for my clientele, how many times has this person started a gym relationship, maybe with a trainer, maybe with a gym, whatever it is, and then stopped. And then why did they stop? They stopped because something about their brain was either making them fear the gym or ashamed of going to the gym or something like that. And the more friction that you put in place of the habit being formed, that sort of 90-day, like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I go to here at this time and I do these things. The more friction you put into that in the way of, pain, fear of soreness, all that kind of stuff, you're doing damage to your client.
Totally.
And it's just not as efficient as building it up over time.
And one thing I'll notice is even for people who have like exercise before, and they're like, oh, I totally work out. And it's just like, have you,
Yeah.
Why are you looking at this then? Why
you're doing P90X?
Exactly.
Right.
Why aren't you already benching 300
out.
pounds? If what you're doing is working, you wouldn't be looking for another solution, right? So It's like we need to take it with that grain of seriousness.
Exactly.
And then one thing I would say is even for intermediate and advanced lifters, so 15 hard sets of squats a week is a lot. For most people, they're kind of upper and lower constraints on volume targets. Flat intensity, so flat working weights across, because let's say that 15 pounds of play doesn't really matter. For an intermediate lifter, you'll kill them. They'll just die.
Yeah.
Dude.
It's not going to work. Same thing with the bench and the press. It's like, are the upper body can handle more volume? Absolutely. Even with a flat intensity, is that going to work for them? Absolutely not. It's not daily undulating periodization, because that is again describing phenomena of what people can do on what days, and it's just like, sure, you can do it. Like, I'm going to focus on speed this day, and we're going to back off 20%. But it exists throughout all of exercise. That sort of that undulation, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, because that's how bodily cycles work.
Exactly. So it's like when we're looking at these things and then we're saying, why are these flat targets across, but they're also super high targets? Now you've confounded that other thing. That's just like, we just want to satisfy our win condition. Our win condition is doing the thing really well, putting more weight on the bar, and then being alive through that process so that you have a good taste in your mouth whenever you get to intermediate training.
Yep.
Rushing to 15 hard sets of squats a week, that's rough for most people, and it could be even rough. People think, oh, what if that's just Alex Mitchell's population of people with Parkinson's who are 70 years old? It's more rough in some ways for athletes who are really strong and really efficient, because their intensity is going to be way higher, and they're going to be like, yeah, I don't get an erection in the morning, I'm not hungry, and my skin hurts when I'm holding my phone. And you're like, yeah, you're overtrained, man. Yeah,
you're going to kill these people if you
exactly. Yeah, you are in a big, deep fatigue hole. So it's like those volume landmarks. That's my big thing on it for sure. Any other last marks on volume stuff? I
had something, but now it's gone.
All right, we'll come back to that. We got a topic or a question from Nodnar. Cool name, Nodnar. I hope that's your first name.
Or I hope you're an orc.
Yeah, Nodnar, the friendly YouTubing orc.
Yep.
But why have I heard don't fail reps? Is it bad mentality, physically, and how can I know before I try that last rep? Listen to Mark Ripito. He's a cool guy. He goes on about this for days.
He does.
There's kind of 60-second soundbite here.
There's kind of some different avenues to this, right? So one, it's a programming thing. So if you're constantly failing reps, you got to change your programming. 2, it's a mentality, right? We don't want you to be a pussy, so we don't want you to fail reps. 3, we want you to grind and get strong, right? It says a set of 5, not a set of 4 or 3 or 2 singles, whatever you want to do, right? You got to give yourself an adequate amount of stress to cause an adaptation.
Yep. And I think it's really important to say, most of the people that we are going to be talking to on the internet need to hear that. And that's why, a lot of what Mark Ripito says in general is geared toward hey, 65 to 70% of the people who I'm talking to need to hear this. And hopefully the other 30% can figure out that they are not in that population. But there are people who are going to push too hard. And for them, you don't be an idiot. Know that we're not talking to you. If you're grinding out a crazy heavy 5x5, then you're already there, dude. You're already there. You need to seek, better programming and make sure that you as like that 30-20% or whatever are not dying every workout. Like
like you will unironically, and this is kind of a thing that, you know, as someone who was just kind of an athlete before and then got into coaching or at least interacting with general population people, sometimes it is insane. Someone will do an RPE 6 set, whatever you want to call it, 7 reps in reserve, whatever fancy auto regulation you call it.
Right.
And then they will re-rack it on rep 2 just because it's like my shirt was pinching in my back. And you're like, what? Like, what the hell? You're like, go watch people, actual
no,
athletes.
We don't do that here.
They'll kill themselves before they give up, you know?
Yep.
So it's a big mentality thing. So it's just like mentality, 100%. Physically, it may be better use of your time to back the weight off and do more reps, depending on where you are at in your training, you know, and it could just be clues for your programming. So it's kind of hard versus from novice versus intermediate or advanced. It's like, I don't want any of my advanced guys who are pulling like high 5s or 6s to be failing reps. You know what I mean? That's so costly for them.
Dude,
But it's just like, if that guy, let's reference that guy again, squats 285, then 225 for 20. If he fails a rep, it's like, yeah, we'll be fine.
Super doesn't matter. It totally does not matter. Yeah, exactly. He'll be okay tomorrow. You know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Good question, Nadnar. A lot of depth in that one. Okay, so we'll do it for the last thing. Who's the general market for starting strength? Who's the general market for Stronglifts? You know, psychologically, what's going to be a little bit different from them? And then why does so many people rush to more is more better for Stronglifts?
So I think our target demographic is 40 and 50-year-olds, right? People who actually need this. And that's not to say like the people who stumble in this that are 20s, 30s, or whatever, but it's people who are serious about their training, not the typical gym bro who's in it for the feel, right? The feel of the burn, how it's like, okay, well, I can't lift my bicep because I blasted with, you know, ladder progression on the curls. I can't. Yeah. You can't do that, right? And I think that's why the Stronglifts is so appealing, is that you have this full body, just fucking dump of stress, and you just lay in your bed and you're just like, man, I can't move. This is perfect.
It's a shotgun. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge shock to the central nervous system. Mm-hmm. And to some people, hey, that's fine. They like that, but that's not how you train, right? Your body's going to start failing if you continuously do that.
Yep. Yeah. Jimmy Pack, good point here. Jimmy said the most attractive thing about starting strength to me was the simplicity, nothing crazy.
Yep. One of the things that I tell my clients when they're coming in, especially the ones who are like, oh, that's all we do. We don't need to do, you know, we only do 5 exercises. I tell them that we are going to try to do the least we need to in order to make you stronger next time you come in. We're not trying to do the most you can do today, because that goes down a rabbit hole we don't need to go down, right? Mm-hmm. That leads to stalling out and pain, and you leave the gym in 90 days.
Let me know if you guys have heard this before. I am 90% sure I stole this from somewhere. I don't know if that's true or not. But when it comes to training economy, it's good to think about it like negotiating for a raise, but kind of in the inverse way that you would normally think about it. When you go into that raise negotiation, you think, this is the minimum amount that I'll accept on this increase. So as I'm putting in my 40, 50 hours a week, this is the minimum that I want out of this, right? So let's say it's another 3% for most people, another 5%. But there's also an upper constraint whether or not you realize it. So let's say that they're like, oh, we'll double your salary for you, but I need you to work 2.5 times the hours. Would you do that, right? Where is that upper constraint for you saying, okay, I'm not actually the most productive person in the world. I'm not Elon Musk, and I'm not the guy who owns Yahweh or whatever. I'm not working 200 hours a week or whatever nonsense they'll say. But you'll realize, oh, there is that upper constraint, right? So maybe instead of, let's say, if I say to someone, if you want optimal results, we're going to do 6 times a week AM, PM sessions. You're going to start steroids immediately. You're going to be out of caloric surplus. And you're not going to look at a single mirror for maybe 3 years, right?
Yeah.
That's too much, right? So for most people, they're looking for that minimum win condition, which is that, let's say, 5% or analogous to 5 pounds in the bar. I just want to get stronger at the things I know I can get stronger at that are useful for me. So it's just like, let's say someone who can take risks. So let's say that 25-year-old, he can go into that raise negotiation with so much more leverage, because he's like, you know what? I'm willing to do an extra 25 hours of work a week. I'm willing to work on that hedge fund in Wall Street and spend 14 hours a day at work, right? And then for the Stronglifts example, that could be someone, or the Texas method example, who is at their mom's, they don't have to pay for any food, they don't have to wake up for a job, you know, they barely have to go to their classes, and then everything can be around strength training for them. Maybe that's a better candidate, you know, they're willing to put in that extra work, but it may be a huge sacrifice. But for the vast majority of people, they're going to go in there, they're going to expect that minimum and be very pleased whenever they get something higher than that. So that kind of income raise thing, it's how I've always thought about how much you should be doing in the gym, you know? Cause like I'll work with a ton of athletes who are willing to put in not retarded, but very silly amounts of work in total. But it's just like, is that actually worth it? You know?
Yeah. Marginal benefit versus marginal cost, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure. Have you guys heard that one before? I can't remember where
I've never heard it before. I love it though. That's a really, really good way of.
I've heard
if
of it.
anyone knows where that's from, let me know.
I
Otherwise,
want to say like maybe
claim it as my
Phil
own.
Megger said something about like, you know, strength is like money in the bank or something like that, but never
That's
to
an
the
article,
detail
yeah.
that you did it. Yeah,
Okay.
you that was a pretty
Pocket
good
that.
explanation.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully that made sense. We're 45 minutes in. What else do we want to talk about? Starting strengths versus NLP. Chin-ups, power clean. We haven't even touched the power clean. What the hell's going on with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't, especially with a power clean where it's such a technical lift, you're not going to do a 5x5 on that. You're going to start practicing a wrong movement pattern, and you're going to start turning it into basically an upright row.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And also, like, you know, you got to look at audience. Stronglifts was built around the idea that, hey, we have this app. We want to get it to as many people as possible. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make it easy to get into, right? And they're not really worried about doing the best thing. They're just worried about getting some results so that it gets places, right? And, you know, you don't need the power clean to get some results. It's optimal, right? That's why we recommend it, and that's why we really vie for it, because we're all about doing things that are optimal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it's like that's one of the things about Stronglifts. We'll go back to the exercise selection criteria. We know, which I didn't think that was the most important one. Chase pointed that as the most important one, and I've completely changed my mind on it. I thought it was going to be volume when I first started writing. Like, what are the main points here people talk about? It's definitely exercise selection, because when we go back to it, power clean, why? We think it's really cool for all of those reasons in the power clean chapter, you know. Just to name a few, but it's just like rate of force production, ability to train that consistently. Very cool. General athleticism, but also intent on pulling a bar and confidence. You know, it's not dissimilar to doing that fifth rep like Nadnar was talking about mentally. You know, it's like having the courage to yank on a power clean. You don't know if you're going to be able to rack it, and throwing the thing up there. That's really cool. Where it's a strong lift, it's like, yeah, you know, you're going to start your barbell row at 45 pounds and add 5 pounds to your barbell row 2 times a week. You deadlift 95 pounds, you're barbell rowing 55 pounds, and you're like, oh, I guess I'll just ladder those up forever. But in the meanwhile, what happens is the bench press runs out or the squat runs out, and then you don't know what to do because, you know, you haven't really given yourself a good foundation of training. But yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially with programming, man, they don't have that basis like how we do with the criteria and exercise selection. I mean, yeah, they kind of think about exercise selection once it gets more appealing with like the advanced shit, with like band chains and all that silly bullshit. But like at the start, yeah, it's like, why are we squatting the way we do? Why are we even squatting? You know, and a lot of people can't even answer that. It's just like, well, you know, I've seen people do that before, and you know, we got to do legs, so I guess this is a leg exercise.
How would you guys respond to this? This is a crazy thing. I'll often say to people after that sort of thing, like, oh, we have a way that we argue is optimal. And they'll be like, oh, well, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. And then the question always back is like, why haven't you thought about it?
Yeah. And I mean, there are definitely, there's a reason why the personal training industry exists. And there's a reason why, having seen it over the course of years of my career, there's a reason why most personal trainers who are successful are drill sergeants. You know, and are training like 5 people at a time, yelling at them to do Bosu ball jumps, or
motivation,
whatever the hell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most people specifically in America, really all they want is someone to yell at them to do their cardio.
Rent a friend, for sure.
That's literally what they are looking for. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why the military uses it to great effect, right?
Yeah.
And they're trying to capture some little bit of that. But the minute you break out and you're saying like, okay, well, I don't really have all day and I've tried all these things and they failed, then you have to start asking the question that Kay was talking about, which is like, why?
It's a character thing. It's kind of a character thing. And I didn't realize this whenever Rip was saying this early on. He was like, yeah, you're kind of like a minimum bar of intelligence that we're looking for here. It's kind of sounds shitty to say, but it's very true. Or it's like narrow
I think
casting.
it's wisdom more than intelligence.
Sure. Regardless, not the ability to take an IQ test, but whatever word you want to use is okay with me. But in the manner of like, are you searching in your life for ways for things to be more efficient? Have you just been tasting bad coffee every morning for 10 years and have never thought to change it? Starting strength may not be for you. Actual programming and coaching may not be for you, because if you were already exercising and you haven't figured, I wonder if there's a better way for me to do this. It's like we have a very thick book that has a lot of the why behind the better way to do it. That may just not be interesting to a lot of people.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird, man.
Anything else?
It's kind of, this is all like it's like the fractal of. I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say. I read this thing and it's in Nassim Nicholas Taleb's book Black Swan, where he's talking about everything is kind of like a fractal pattern, right? So you got libertarianism, which is like basically self-sufficiency. And then that's stewed down to like starting strength. And then now that's, just like all these levels behind it. It's kind of weird, man. I'm having
infinitely reductive.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yo, if you guys want to go through a deep rabbit hole, I'm going to give you something for free here at the end of the live stream. Robert Sapolsky of Stanford has an incredible lecture series on behavioral biology, and he goes into fractals and chaos theory and all that kind of shit. If you want to go down like a 20-hour crazy rabbit hole,
Chaos theory,
you're welcome.
Yeah. Okay, I'll check that out. I haven't checked that out.
Dude,
it's on the to-do list for sure.
It's wild. You're all welcome. You're really, seriously, you're going to come thanking me later.
Yeah, anything that says chaos theory, that sounds cool enough for me.
You have
cool enough to spend my time on. But yeah, so we're at the 51-minute mark. I think we wrap this up in a bow. If you could give an elevator pitch to someone, let's say 30-second elevator pitch to someone, and they're like, I'm thinking about doing Stronglifts, and you're like, you should do starting strength instead. How would you tackle that? Whoever wants to goes for it.
I'll go first.
No, Chase. Okay.
Would you want to be able to walk in the morning? Because here you're going to get the most bang for your buck, man. We actually know what you're doing. Instead of relying on a program to make you stronger, we're actually going to see how you're moving day to day. We're actually going to tailor the program suitable to you, right? I mean, at the start, yes, it's general, but we can always fix it if need be. Whereas, what are you going to do with a strong lift, right? You're kind of already using one of your cards in the hole, and that is you're using volume to kind of manipulate the stress, but it's too soon.
Mm-hmm. Mitch?
You're gonna do less, and you're gonna get more.
Yeah. Frankly, at the end of the day, you're setting yourself up for that potential future gain.
That's all it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say just time economy be the big one. Like he was saying, do less, get more, but you're setting yourself up for a more productive future.
Yep.
Because it's like Stronglifts, I think in a lot of ways they're trying to sell you a thing. We're trying to sell you a why or a line of reasoning. That line of reasoning lasts way longer.
Right. It's always the harder pitch. It is always more. You're always going to catch less people. You're going to have a lower population if you start talking about reasons. There's a reason why, CNN and Fox News have the viewership that they do, whereas some independent journalist who is literally just reading like the NDAA is going to have some tiny fraction of that. Right. But that's more substantive and it lasts longer.
Exactly. And if that's something that fits your flavor palette, go for it. Jimmy Pack said, do you want to get stronger than you ever thought you could in a short period of time and still have time for your life? Starting strength is for you.
Dude,
it's like,
let's hire him.
Jimmy's a really good example. He's actually one of my boys. And he's like deep into intermediate programming at this point, and he's still on the same exact time slot. And he's lost a stupid amount of weight and is like quite strong now. So it's like, he's that guy I was talking about who had like literally 100% adherence rate completely out of the blue. I was just like, this is awesome. This is crazy. And I was like, perfect client, just slam dunk, half court. But yeah, so what do you guys think? Well, we can workshop this out just on the podcast. What other topics do you guys think you want to cover? We can do the Diego Selinsky C bar path versus midfoot for Olympic lifts. Anything popping out to you that you guys want to delve into? Because I want to make sure, I want to have it so that we can kind of rotate a little bit. Maybe we can do half an hour topic, half an hour form checks.
I think the Olympic lifts thing, I would love nerding out about it, and I also kind of hate it. Because
the 8 people who are interested.
Yeah, exactly. And also like the fact that like I think that, as a brand, Starting Strength has really stuck their foot in the sand there, and it's like, okay, is that really the fight we want to die on? But nerding out, there is a lot to nerd on about.
For sure. Okay, Chase, anything popping up in your brain that you want to topic? We can do transitions. Here's something I was thinking of: transitions to intermediate. When to do something akin to a hypertrophy block, because people think that, like, I just don't have the muscle mass to sustain the weight that I want to move. Those are two. We could do a lot just on technique or coaching. That's another thing. No one is really talking about how to manually coach the lifts, because it's kind of this, I don't want to say guarded secret, but it's just like, it's our trade, So we could definitely do that too.
Yeah.
What are you guys thinking?
I think that the intermediate thing, we really need to do that. I've been wanting to make a video about that for a while, because I think it is so not only chronically misunderstood, but completely misunderstood, right? It is almost the entire listenership of this podcast and of Starting Strength at large misunderstands that transition. And also, like, they misunderstand it to the degree that they aren't conceptualizing the basics of it, right?
Yeah. So I guess what Alex Mitchell is trying to say, stress recovery adaptation models, or adaptation models as applied to programming, ? Because that's what intermediate programming really is,
Yeah.
We're basically just going to redo the board exam here, just on
the dude. Basically. Oh man.
Yeah. Do you have any good questions from the board exam, Chase, that we could dig into? Don't spill the beans precisely.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's kind of hard, but, like, I guess we can. I'm trying to formulate this. So, I mean, one of them is how you yourself may think that doing more is better, in the sense that, how do I tie this in with my Pilates? How do I tie this in with swimming or something like that? Mm-hmm. Actually getting through your head that strength is what you need, and it's actually going to affect everything. The basis of, look, this is from the simplest of being, this is force production. Everything is force, right? Strength is the ability to produce force. You are doing basically everything in your life is strength related. So you once you get a good layer of strength, you're solid. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. It's kind of like,
I think it would be really interesting.
That's a good one.
Like you're saying, to talk especially about, like, how you communicate that, because you're essentially trying to put an idea into someone's head that they've never had before. And that's notoriously difficult, right?
I always go the privilege angle. The privilege angle. It's just like, you want to get stronger and be really fast and be really cool and learn new skills at the same time. So does fucking everybody else. It doesn't work, like, it's so much easier to take an athlete who is really robust and strong and then teach them really good skill sets, as opposed to, oh, cool, I have, like, a really weak, fragile nerd, and I'm going to start teaching him all of these extra cool skills. And you run into this a lot in the martial arts world, grappling especially, where it's just like, hey man, you want to be an effective grappler, but it's just like, you can't do, like, 4 push-ups. It's not going to work, man. We can't put the cart before the horse,
Right.
That's a good one. We can go into that one. I like that one a lot. We got intermediate programming / stress adaptation models. What the hell?
We could do when it is appropriate to change LP, right? When it is appropriate.
Training modifications.
Training modifications for the sticky stuff, right? Like LP, or when to switch to intermediate early, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So those will last us 10, 45 hours. I have no idea.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then, Chase, what's your favorite lift to coach?
I love the squat. It's kind of that element of, one, you have this complex movement pattern, because the knees essentially can do whatever the fuck they want. And if you don't have your knees set, then it fucks up everything. Right. And 2, it's a lift that you kind of have always that thought in the back of your mind, like, dude, this thing is fucking heavy and it's going to pin me down to the floor. Mm-hmm.
Very threatening.
And coaching that. Yeah. And if you've ever spotted someone and coached someone during a heavy set of 5, it's fucking tiresome almost, but I love it. I love whenever, like, you're yelling into the person's ear, like, as they're struggling through that 4th rep, that, dude, you got to do one more, and you got to drive your hips. Right? I think
it can be very emotional. All right. So, I guess we'll definitely do a coaching the squat intricacies. What the hell again? Episode. Mitchell, what's your favorite lift to coach, man?
It's without a doubt, unequivocally, and I think it might have to do with the demographic difference too, the deadlift. Like
Okay.
with no matter where my people's hips are, no matter where their knees are, no matter what's going on with their body, they are able to pick something up from the ground, or maybe a little higher than the ground, right?
Yeah.
And that like basic ability ties into their ability to like take care of themselves and wipe their own ass and live functionally. Exactly. And just like seeing all that knowledge like come together in a cascading way in their brain, seeing that through their eyes as I'm coaching them through this, and they're like realizing all that stuff.
This is a thing I can do.
Every single time it reminds me why I got into this career.
Oh, we got one from Stephen Luis. Stronglifts is a workout. Starting strength is a training program. Unironically, that's really tight.
I thought that was really
very
concise.
Tight. And then Greg Locke, how much contact should I have when spotting someone squat? I've been bro squatted before.
Their ass.
I've been bro spotted before.
Have you ever failed?
That's why I would need the bro spot.
Yeah.
Of like literally hands under pecs, full contact.
Same, actually. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's just men sharing a powerful moment together.
Yeah, dude. Oh yeah.
We become one person together.
Totally heterosexual dudes, I'm sure, just having a really good moment.
Just sharing a powerful moment.
No, I failed 405 with a bodybuilder bro squatting me, and it was really, I gotta say, that was an intimate, comforting moment for sure. Yeah. That said, don't do it. No one do it. Don't do it. Please don't do it.
Yeah. A lot of times, if someone's close to failing a rep, just 2 fingers under the bar, same thing with a bench press. That's all they need. They need like 10 pounds of pressure off the bar. That's it. They don't need. And if someone's spotting 5 bills or 4 bills, you shouldn't be spotting like that anyways. Let them fail to the pins.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll definitely have a big deadlift episode, coaching the deadlift intricacies. Why? What the hell? Same thing with the squat. I think my favorite lift to teach is actually the power clean because of how, while we have a really defined teaching model, the interventions you'll have to pull out of your ass and communication tools it's such a broad scope. You can really, a lot of jazz, a lot of individual stuff that you can do from there.
It's the thing that I think really does separate the wheat from the chaff in the starting strength platform exam is who teaches the power clean correctly and who passes the power clean.
For sure. Absolutely. So we'll do contact information. If you want to send in a form check, which we're going to be doing again next week, I know this was a bit of a surprise. You can send that to support, or let's look at the forgive my silliness, support@strength.club. We'll do some normal form checks and maybe another topic next week. Chase, where can we find you, man?
Just Instagram, Chase Lindley.
Okay. What do you do? What's on there? Is that like a food account for recipes you make at night, or what is it?
Exactly. It's just where I get drunk and I randomly just post shit. No, it's
political rants.
Exactly. It's basically a trading log, man, and I use it for if people are DMing me random questions. I answer that.
Okay. Cool. Alex Mitchell, what's going on, man?
Before you shout out me, you gotta shout out Chase_Lindley.
You
gotta follow Chase_Lindley.
I need to make sure that Nick and I'll monitor. We need to make sure that in every video description, Chase_Lindley.
Yes.
Yeah,
dude.
My name's Alex Mitchell again. I am in Sandy Springs, Georgia, which is just north of Atlanta, or in Atlanta if you're like that. And as we've been talking about a little bit, I coach older athletes, usually masters athletes in their 40s, 50s, and over. Or if you got something funky going on health-wise, or something that makes it kind of tricky to do the programming around, or if you're just starting from a really, really low bar, like you just got through with like chemotherapy intervention or something like that, then, reach out to me at Stronger Now Gym on Twitter and Facebook, strongernowgym.com on the web. And you can always call me or email me as well. Alex@strongernowgym.com.
No texting though.
You can text me, dude, out of the blue.
Okay,
yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
I'd rather, dude, I love the people who text me out of the blue and like, hey, this is so-and-so. I wanted to inquire about your program. Let's go. I love it.
For sure. My name is Alex Kosare. There's a little thing floating above my forehead right now, hiding my beautiful hair. I do online coaching as well. I consider myself a little bit of a programming nerd. So if that's something you want to get in the weeds to or argue about, I will fist fight you over it. 100% guaranteed to death. But yeah, I do online coaching. Check it out. Website links all over the place. If you're still watching this, or if you're going to watch this later on, do us a favor, share this with someone, or just leave it on YouTube, repeat like 1,000,000 times.
Please do.
Just loop it. Just get 3 computers, get some scripts going. Yeah, we'll be back next week with more form checks and some other stuff.
Chase, I think we need to get off of this podcast because I think Kay is stealing our eyebrows every single podcast.
They just get more and more.
Like,
His keep getting bigger, and mine are
Oh.
slowly deteriorating.
Yeah. When I come to Georgia for the lifting camp, it's going to be the final thing. You're just going to get alopecia just all over here.
And you'll go full Dragon Ball Z and get the big hair.
Yeah, it's going to be
Super
the final
Saiyan 3.
moment.
Okay, gotcha.
Sure.
That will be your final form.
But okay. All right, everybody signing off.
Peace, guys.